we'll see who. Let's go ahead and give your next 5 then.
So this first guy, I think I'm lower on than you. I have Russell Westbrook here.
Okay.
Russell Westbrook, I think we're going to see this season what he actually is. This past season, I don't think was a fair look because actually maybe it was a fair look. Like if he's the best guy, and I say the best guy because he did a lot of the work when Bradley Beal was hurt. If he's the best guy on a fringe playoff team, I think this is the range you should be in. And that's why I have him here. He's a great rebounder. He's one of the best passers in the league. And that's kind of where the list stops. And those two things are incredibly valuable skills. Like the fact that we talk about the triple doubles a lot, but I almost think the triple doubles become underrated because of Russell Westbrook. And I think that is not, I think that's a compliment to him that he makes it look so effortless that we don't even think it's that important anymore. But he has blown everyone away in this category because he is such a good ball watcher as far as, getting the ball off the rim. And yes, he's probably taking rebounds away from the bigs a lot when he shouldn't, but he also likes to get the ball and go. So that's something I'll defend from him. And again, great passer. The problem and why he's in this range compared to maybe where you have him and maybe some other people is that his shot making at the rim is gone. And if the athleticism is great, if you can blow past guys, that's great. You got to make the shot at the rim. And we kind of started to see this in Houston, and this season was really bad. And I don't have the numbers up, but the shots at the rim are just so much lower than they used to be. He's never been a good shooter, so that's kind of where he is. He's a great rebounder and great passer, and not much else. Next is Valanciunas. Love the guy, one of my favorite centers in the league. I still think the Grizzlies won the Marc Gasol trade, even though they won a championship. I think Valanciunas was better than Gasol at the time, and obviously he is now. But he's just kind of a do-it-all guy. I just like him a lot. I have De'Aaron Fox now.
Okay.
De'Aaron Fox last year would have been higher on this list, but what we've seen from these other guards, namely Trae Young and John Morant, has kind of made me realize that De'Aaron Fox is just not on their level, because I'm not going to say that De'Aaron Fox has had as good of a team as those guys. Obviously, that's not true. But I think if you put either of those guys in the situation of De'Aaron Fox, they would find more out of it than he has. And obviously his lack of a shot and defense hurts that. But I just think he's got a lot to prove now because of his peers. And so I think he gets pushed down the list because he's definitely one of the better point guards in the league, but compared to those top tier guys, he's on a different level. So I think belongs pretty comfortably in this spot. Next, DeMar DeRozan, a guy that you talked about last week. I just love his passing. I love his ability to really run an offense. I think San Antonio I think he's going to look a lot better in Chicago. There's more shooting. There's just more talent altogether. And, what you talked about last week is fair. Like, he's not a good shooter. He's not a good defender. That's fair. But I think he's one of the best shot creators in the league. I really think that he is a guy that if you want a bucket at the end of the game, he's probably at worst in the top 10. Like, he is unbelievably good at getting a shot that he likes. And he's very good at getting those shots. I think that alone, obviously I've shown with this list that I love shot creators. I think that puts him into the top 50. And then Draymond Green, the best role player of this generation. And yes, it's helped that he has played with two of the best shooters ever, if not the best two. But his defense has played a large role in that. And his ball handling on those teams and still on the team now is incredibly important. I mean, Curry plays off the ball a lot, and Draymond Green is handling it a lot. He's running the offense, and he does a good job of kind of quarterbacking that team. And even though he's not the same offensive player he was a few years ago. He's never really been a great offensive player aside from his passing, but he's just so good at knowing what to do. And the defense is still unbelievably good. It's definitely not what it was, but it's still better than almost anyone in the league. So it's going to be hard for me to ever push him out of the top 50, I think, because he plays his role perfectly, and I'm a big fan of that.
It's always a shocker to me which guys you're higher on than me and which guys you're lower on than me. I'm not shocked at all that you're lower on me than Russell Westbrook. I have him in the next tier after this one. So we're actually kind of similar. Valanciunas, I'm not surprised that you're higher on him than me. I'm surprised that you're lower on me than De'Aaron Fox, I'll say. I think that's probably my biggest shocker, and he's in my top 30, actually.
Oh.
And I'll get into that when we get there. I'm shocked that you're higher on me than Draymond. I'm one of the biggest Draymond fans I know, and I thought I was high on him putting him at 46. But listen, I'm not going to disagree with you. The points on DeMar are fair. I can't dispute it, right? Like, he is just an incredible person at getting his shot off. But if he were better, they'd have won so many more games, right? That's my thing, because he was the best player there for the last 2 years, not LaMarcus. LaMarcus had kind of fallen off in 2018, 19, 20, 19, 20 range anyway. And then last year he was just awful for the Spurs. And then I think that DeMar was really good, right? But I think that San Antonio team is like last year's San Antonio team probably underperformed given the grand scheme of things, given their talent on their roster, right? Like, just look at the guys that are going to go around the league this year and make an impact on their next stops. Obviously, you have DeMar. He's going to make an impact in Chicago. I think Rudy Gay is going to make a huge impact in Utah. You have Patty Mills in your top 100. I think that he's going to make a huge impact in Brooklyn. And then obviously you have DeJounte, you have Derek White, you have Keldon Johnson, who was really good last year. In the grand scheme, this team probably should have been better than 10th, right? They probably should have been in the top 8, probably should have been fighting to avoid the play-in. Maybe not that good, but this is my thing not against DeMar, because I love him as a player, and I'm a huge DeMar DeRozan fan watching him play. If he were better, the team would have avoided the play-in. That's just my only thing, right? And maybe not avoided the play-in, but they would have avoided the loser take all game, the loser goes home game in the 9-10 matchup. So I like his game a lot. I just think that there's a lot of guys who do what he can do, who as well as he can, in addition to doing other stuff.
That's fair. I will say, I think San Antonio's big problem last season was the fact that they didn't have a center, essentially. I mean, that I think was a huge deal. If you just put whatever league average center you can think of, like,
let's say
you were
Brook
down
Lopez.
Brook Lopez, Steven Adams, like either of those guys. I think that would have made a huge difference. And those are guys that aren't changing lives for anyone, for any team. But I think San Antonio, it would have, because when Pirtle got thrust into that starting role, his defensive flaws majorly got exposed. And when you have a team that's not necessarily built to be some defensive juggernaut as it is, but when the most important defensive spot on the floor is not fulfilled, it's just going to be really tough. And also, I'll say that I think Derek White was hurt a little bit. They had some injuries, so I'm not here to make excuses because I don't care about the Spurs. But DeMar probably could have been better. I mean, I'm not going to qualm with that at all, but I think there was a lot of other issues that kind of sunk them too.
That's fair. I'll be curious to see what they do this year. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. I think that it's not really close, but I think we'll see where they go from here. I think DeMar in Chicago is an interesting fit, personally. Like, the defense, if he was better at defense, I think that team, you could pencil them in for 50 wins. But he's not. Zach's not great, and obviously Vooch, who is actually going to be in the next 5 guys I named, he's not great on defense either. So I'll just be curious to see what happens with them. Like I said, I have De'Aaron Fox in the top 30, but we'll get to that later. My next five. So at 45, I have a guy you have in the 70s, Caris LeVert. I thought he was really good in Indiana when he was healthy, and I think he's been really good in Brooklyn the last couple of years. I think personally he probably was the best player not named Kyrie on the 2020 Nets, because obviously Katie didn't play. I thought he was better than Spencer. I thought he was better than Kyrie, and then he was really good in Indiana last year. At 44, I have Malcolm Brogdon, guy you just mentioned. I have at 43, I have CJ McCollum, who you have in the 60s. I think CJ is really good. I think the shot creation is really good, and his defense is terrible. But I think if you put him next to on a team where he could kind of have free reign a little bit more, I think he would shine in that role personally. I have VanVleet at 42, and I have Vucevic at 41. Who you had in the 50s. VanVleet to me is one of the best guard defenders in the league. He was really good, and his shooting is real, very real. He's not that great of a finisher. I think that VanVleet is just a massive impact player. And like, let's just say the Raptors proposed for whatever reason, VanVleet for Simmons. I think the Sixers jump all over that deal, even though I have VanVleet lower than Simmons. I just think VanVleet's the kind of guy that could complement a great big man like that, or a great wing. I think he's a really good. This is a funny way to put this. He's like a great complementary player, where like if he's not your lead guy and you have him as the secondary player, as the second best player on your team, I think you're in a really good spot.
Yeah, this is funny how this is playing out, because I'm so much lower on Pascal than you, but I'm much higher on OG, and I'm a little bit higher than on VanVleet. I'm guessing I'll be lower on Lowry, but I guess that remains to be seen. But yeah, I think he is awesome. I was listening to a Raptors broadcast earlier in the season last year, and they were talking about him being one of the best defensive guards in the league. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that is such a homer call. And then I actually started watching him. I'm like, holy shit, this dude's one of the best guard defenders in the league. I mean, his hands, he's so good at his hands. He's a small dude, but he is pretty, like, I would say strong at positioning himself. I think he does a really good job of playing bigger than he is, I would say. And he's just one of those guys that's like a pest. And I mean, the Sixers is a good, like him, Seth Curry, and Embiid, I think would be a fascinating, like, to see floor balance wise. I mean, the shooting of the two guards and then the defense with VanVleet and Embiid's offense down low and his defense too. I mean, I that would be amazing, and it would be a major win for the Sixers to do that.
It absolutely would. VanVleet, so he averaged a steal a game in his first two seasons where he got actual playing time. And in the last 2 years, in 2019-20, or his first game where he was a full-time starter, he had 1.9 steals a game. Then last year, in 52 games, 1.7 steals a game. Like, that's pretty hard to do on a consistent basis, and he can just steal it from you nonstop. I love that about him. I mean, the shooting efficiency isn't great, but again, I think he's going to bounce back to the 41% where he was at before they played in Tampa. Like, last year was so weird for the Raptors. I wouldn't be surprised if like they fuck around and get into the A seed playing the exact same way they did last year, right? Just because of the Tampa thing. Like, that's so weird to evaluate the guys coming off of that, but Fred's defense is incredible. And then Brogdon, you and I had him in the same range. Oh, I want to just bring up Westbrook. So I pulled up our favorite site, Cleaning the Glass, while you were talking about Westbrook. His rim finishing actually didn't fall off at all. His rim finishing is actually still pretty elite. Last year it was in the 84th percentile at 65%. Where he's fallen off, I think you would agree, Dylan, peak Russell Westbrook was a danger from the mid-range. He was a threat from the mid-range. And the last 5 years, the last good year he had from the mid-range was the last year Kevin Durant was there. 37%, 38%, 32%, 40%, 39% from mid-range the last 5 years. The mid-range has fallen off, and he was never a great three-point shooter to begin with, but it just really hasn't been there at all. the last couple of years. Last year, he was in the 7th percentile for threes. Just like the outside shooting has collapsed, and you can play off Russ now. And you could next year, if he's trying to throw a post entry pass into AD, they might be just sitting at AD's lap, right? Just saying, hey, go ahead and try to make an entry pass. And teams have successfully baited Russ into shooting. And that's not a good sign if you can be successfully baited into taking your worst shot. I have Russ in the next group, right? My next 5. So we weren't that far off on Russ. I just think that what he does well, he does better than just about anybody. But what he does bad, he's just about the worst in the league at his bad stuff. Like his bad tendencies. Russell Westbrook is a very much like, oh, you have to take the great with the awful, right? Normally it's you take the good with the bad, but in his case, it's take the great with the awful. He's a very fun player. He's a very flawed one too.
As soon as the Lakers made that trade, I'm like, this is going to be awesome for AD, but him and LeBron, I don't see how that works. I mean, LeBron is kind of relies on shooting more now. I think because it's not that he doesn't have the athleticism he used to. I mean, I guess that's a fair thing to say, but I don't think he wants to attack the rim constantly because he's like, I'm 38 or whatever. I'm going to get beat to hell. So he's kind of just fallen back on his shot a little bit. So maybe that is something that happens. I don't know. I mean, this isn't really a preview pod or anything, but Russell has always been good for bigs. Look at last season. Well, before Thomas Bryant got hurt, that was like the one lone bright spot that they had because they were horrible to start the season. But Thomas Bryant was awesome. And it was because of Westbrook just constantly finding him hanging at the top of the key or finding him for lobs or whatever it was. And obviously Anthony Davis happens to be much better than Thomas Bryant. And when you get him the ball, he's pretty good. I mean, I'm thinking back to New Orleans when Rondo was there, He was so good with Rondo because Rondo knew how to get him the ball at certain places. And I think Westbrook could be the same. But it's just with everyone else in the mix, I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and the spacing is going to be significantly, I'd say it's going to be the same as it was in Washington last year. But how is he going to react? Because the other two teams, he kind of wrestled control away from the top guys, right? Like in Houston, it eventually became his team where he was playing, basically the center on offense role. And then in Washington, it's like, okay, Brad didn't really want to carry the team. He's like, okay, I'm going to get my shots up, but someone else does all, like the assisting and the rebounding and stuff. Brad wasn't interested in doing that, which is fair, right? That he doesn't really have the body build to do that. But Russ took over and they went on a rabid run and made the playoffs. Like they were the best team not the best team. They were like one of the best teams record-wise in the East after the All-Star break. Like they went on a ridiculous tear, and Russ has the ability to take over games. But then let's pull up the playoff stats from this year, shall we? Because 19 points a game, 12 assists, not bad. The shooting splits, 33, 25, and 79, which actually is a market improvement from his free throw percentage the previous year, which was 42. The shooting splits last year were 42, 24, 53. So basically, let's just go through the career field goal percentages in the playoffs after KD left. Got 39, 40, 36, 42, 33. He's very inefficient, very boomer bust. And the field goal attempts after KD left. The field goal attempts in 2017 were 30, which if you remember that team, it adds up because that team was awful without him. 2018, 27 attempts a game. 2019, 22. 2020, 17.5. Last year, 17. Like, very boomer bust, and in the playoffs, it's been a lot more bust than boom.
Yeah, and for a Lakers team that's trying to win a championship, good luck with that.
If Kawhi and Jamal Murray were healthy, I would say that they'd have the third best odds at best. I'd still probably take the Suns over them, the way their team is constructed now. I don't like the way their roster is constructed, but I'm more than willing to be proven wrong this season.
Yeah, I'm willing to be proven wrong too. I don't know. It's just weird, but weird things have worked out before, so we'll see.
They have, and that's a good note to end it on. Shout out to Malcolm Brogdon, who we didn't talk about a whole lot. Just very complimentary player. And I think he'd fit on. I think all 30 teams would want a guy like Malcolm Brogdon with his skill set. So